Hello and welcome to Classic Motorsport Podcast. I'm Gareth Thomas, and today we're going to do something a little different. We're doing top 10s. We're going to do top 10 of best first races for Formula 1 tracks. For my video viewers, you'll see a list of 10 through 1, and I'm going to go through them one at a time. For the audio listeners, you've got to bear with me. And for number 10, I've chosen the 1970 German Grand Prix, and it had a very interesting one. It was held at the vastly modified and upgraded Hockenheimring instead of the Nürburgring, and the reason was drivers demanded to have the Nürburgring upgraded and safety ready for August 2nd, which was the race date for the German Grand Prix. The officials at the Nürburgring said that they couldn't do it in time, so they went to Hockenheim instead. And Jack Brabham said to the drivers, "We're not going to the Nürburgring." And this was a drivers' meeting on the day of Bruce McLaren's funeral. And basically, they were okay and satisfied with the safety features at the Hockenheimring for it to be raced. Qualifying saw Ickx on pole ahead of Wendt, and Wendt had a rather poor start, and then obviously both Ickx and Wendt would basically have a race-long tussle. Claywicks only would lead for 2 laps, but most of the race it was swapping the lead. Basically, "13 lead changes, 12 of which were between Ickx and Wendt, and in the end, Wendt won by 7/10 of a second from Ickx, with Holmes McLaren third over a minute and a half back." Was it quite a good race? Yeah, it was quite a good race to watch and see. Obviously, I wasn't born to 2000, but looking at the old archive footage, it was honestly that good. And one thing it did produce was the drafting effects that drivers had to play with the draft. I had to pick number 9 carefully, and I've chosen the 1982 Detroit Grand Prix. First race on the streets of the Detroit street circuit, home of the motor industry, and it was quite a chaotic weekend. Due to problems with the organisers, they had planned to have practice on the Thursday as well as Friday and Saturday. Thursday was cancelled, and the first session on Friday had to be postponed. There was time for only a 1-hour practice session on Friday, so that qualifying can take place on Saturday in 2 1-hour sessions 4 hours apart. Unbelievably, Nelson Piquet Sr. failed to qualify, and it had a rather interesting grid with Prost on the pole, with Andrea de Cesaris' Alfa Romeo alongside. Second time that de Cesaris got himself a front row start in America. Last time he did that, he ended up whacking whilst in second place. Watson was down in 17th, the championship leader Pironi was 4th, Lauda was 10th, and in the race, 6 laps in, Patrese had a collision, and they ended up having to red flag the race because his car caught fire. And it took an hour while all repairs took part, and then race was decided on aggregate, which in my view is BS in my view, because having aggregate races makes it impossible for fans at the track and also for the viewers to see what's going on. Somehow Watson managed to do 3 overtakes in one lap, got past Rosberg for the lead, and then managed to keep the gap afloat to win the race. It was potentially his best drive that I've seen, and quite good to see. I'm going to stay in the 80s and go to the 1986 Spanish Grand Prix, the first race at WEF. So, Ayrton Senna took pole of the PK's Williams, and for the most of the race it was Senna holding off both Williamses, and then PK retired pretty much with a blown engine. Nigel Mansell got past on that 40, and then obviously Mansell had a pit, obviously, after Senna and Prost got past, and then obviously in the final 10 laps Mansell, making up over 19 seconds on the fresh weather, got past Prost, and then set about chasing Senna, but it was a few centimetres short. A very close finish. It was the third closest finish in Formula 1 history. And obviously Mansell said afterwards they should have given them both 7.5 points each. I think that's a bit cheated the system for that. But I'm sure that was quite fun to see a race like that. Obviously, that was my number 8 pick. Number 7, got to go to the 2010 Korean Grand Prix. So, obviously, it was quite a difficult circuit to be. And the main difficulty with the circuit was trying to get it done in time. And basically there was other political problems, obviously with hostilities between North and South Korea, and obviously the earthquakes from earlier that year. There was not 100% sure whether they could get the race in. Although it was a positive response on the circuit layout. And then obviously practice was done in dry, but then qualifying was done in the dry as well, and then the race happened. Supposed to start 3 o'clock Korean time, 7 AM British time. Rain just boom went down. New start time was set 10 minutes later. Race was started behind the safety car with drivers required to use full wet tyres, but they struggled for grip. Red flag was out for 45 minutes until the marshals and road sweepers removed some of the excess water and dirt on the track. Resin on the track had prevented water from soaking into the ground. It was restarted by the safety car, and at the end of the first racing lap things went well, and then Webber spun off and took out Rosberg, and then basically safety car was out, and then several cars went off, and then obviously, unbelievably, Vettel had his engine seized. Alonso took the lead and went on to win. And there was lots of retirements, and the race was done within the 2-hour time limit of the race, but it was half dark when the race started. But anyway, it was quite an interesting pick. And for number 6, I've chosen the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix. I'm just reminding myself, because some of the races were pretty much before my time, some of which I can remember from the back of my hand. And basically, heading into the weekend, everyone was talking about the FISO elections, which Max Mosley beat Jean-Marie Balest. And the other talking point was Mansell injuring his ankle during a football match. But anyway, Mansell qualified second behind Gerhard Berger, with Senna third. And then it was raining on race day morning, and it was Berger and Senna that got a good start. On lap 3, Prost pitted, and then Piquet followed. Unbelievably, Berger, Mansell and Senna stayed out. Mansell and Senna went side by side, with Mansell going through in second. Berger then pitted, and then had a rather lengthy stop to remove tape off the brake ducts. Mansell and Senna pitted. Senna got ahead of Mansell, and then an uncharacteristic error by Senna to spin off. Mansell, also Patrese, LAC, and a young German by the name of Schumacher going past. And then obviously then Schumacher then spun off himself, still lacking experience. Mansell chased up Berger and got past him. Berger then retired with electrical problems, and then obviously Prost ended up fending off Patrese for second, Senna down in fifth. The championship battle was alive heading into Japan, where Mansell spun off but Senna was later grand champion. The next race I put on the list for number 5 was the 1984 Portuguese Grand Prix, and that was the season finale. 3.5 points separated Niki Lauda and Alain Prost at this venue. The venue was basically 12 years old when they first joined, and basically it was Piquet on pole ahead of Prost, but Piquet was mathematically out of it, with Senna's Tolman a shocking third ahead of Rosberg's Williams. Lauda was down in 11th. Unbelievably, Lauda had turbo problems, and he had to slipstream his way past and showed everyone the driving skills, passing one after the other, including Tambay, Alboreto, Rosberg and Senna. And then when Mansell had his brake failure, Lauda was second. Prost won, but he couldn't do anything much about championship because Lauda finished second and became world champion for the third time by half a point. And Lauda did say it was the toughest championship, obviously. And after the race, Peter Waugh said that Mansell refused to give Mansell brake ducts because Mansell was leaving Lotus for Williams, and the pair never got on. And he revealed that that Mansell would never win a Grand Prix as long as I got a hole in my, I'm not. The reason why I say that is not to be rude. So, number 4 is the 1993 European Grand Prix, and that is my number 4 pick. There was plans to hold an Asian Grand Prix at the Nippon Autopolis circuit on the date of April 11th, but that was cancelled. Donington Park was awarded a race instead, and basically it was a very topsy-turvy race. The two Williams cars were first and second, Prost ahead of Hill, but at the start Senna got bogged down from 4th on the grid, went down to 5th, and then went from 5th to 1st in a lap, passing Wenger Sauber, Schumacher's Benetton, and both Williamses. Also during that time, a big charge came up from Rubens Barrichello in a Jordan. In 1993, the Jordan cars were rubbish. 6 or 7 pit stops. Unbelievably, the McLaren pit crew of 93, who were well known for their fast pit stops, messed up. And Senna was in the pits for 30 odd seconds, letting Prost through, and then, when Prost pitted, he ended up making a mistake of his own, stalling the engine. And then Senna drove through the pit lane without stopping after the team thought that he was ready to pit, but the team made an error saying that they weren't ready, and then obviously it was a tipsy-turvy race, with Senna winning by over a minute and a half from Hill in second, with Prost third. Obviously that led Senna to lead the championship, but Prost would later clinch the title at the end of the year. We're going to go all the way back to 1976 for the number 3 pick, where it was the Japanese Grand Prix at Fuji Speedway. Season finale again. 3 points separated championship leader Niki Lauda to James Hunt. And on the morning of the race, it thrashed it down. Wet weather. And the race was delayed by over an hour and a half. But the race had to be started due to because being one of the early races to have basically shown internationally, it was television pressure that forced the race to be started. Mario Andretti was on the pole. Hunt got a better start and led, but Lauda retired after 2 laps, criticising the weather to be too dangerous, plus he was still suffering from after effects after the accident that he had at the Nürburgring. Hunt continued to lead until being passed by the Practic Depailler 6-wheel Tyrrell and then Andretti's Lotus, but Depailler was passed by Andretti. Depailler then had to pit for a puncture, and then Hunt had to pit with a puncture. That dropped Hunt back to 5th. He needed 4th to win the title because he would win on countback. 3rd would almost certainly guarantee it. So he drove as hard as he could, passing both Clay Regazzoni's Ferrari and Alan Jones's Surtees. And he finished 3rd, a lap down on race winner Andretti, but Hunt was champion. He didn't know till after the race that he had won the championship. It was something that everyone did not expect to see coming. And that's why I put that as my number 3 pick. The number 2 pick is arguably the most controversial race in the history of Formula 1. Crashgate 2008 Singapore. Formula 1's 800th Grand Prix, the first ever at night. A new addition to the calendar. Obviously, it was held at night because to appease the European audience, which I live in Europe, and certainly that suited me perfectly, because I don't want to get up at like 5 or 6 a.m. to watch a motor race, and obviously having a night race in Singapore suited me. In qualifying, Massa was on pole with Hamilton alongside, and in the race, Massa led for Hamilton, but then Nelson Piquet Jr. was ordered to crash by the Renault team in order to help teammate Fernando Alonso, who had already pitted. And this was lap 14 of the race. Safety car was brought out, and at the time, the rules about the pit lane was that it was closed until the race director, who was Charlie Whiting at the time, said it was okay to be open. Pit lane was open, and Alonso stayed out and led from the 2 Red Bulls, which were Mark Webber and Dave Coulthard, and the McLaren of Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton passed Coulthard, and then when Webber started, Hamilton had to make do with 2nd place, with Alonso winning. Obviously, the whole saga of Crashgate wasn't revealed to just before the 2009 race, and it was more controversial than it looked. Obviously, it's known as the most hated race in F1 history. That resulted in Pat Simmons receiving a 5-year ban, Fabio Briatore, who was in charge of the team, a lifetime ban, but both appealed it. Simmons still involved in the sport, managing more of the technical side of F1, while Briatore acts as the manager of Fernando Alonso. The number 1 pick I've chosen is the 2021 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Obviously, prior to the race, everyone was talking about human rights because Saudi Arabia has got a long history of violations of human rights abuses. Everyone talked about it. Basically, heading into the weekend, both Sebastian Vettel of Aston Martin and Lewis Hamilton of Mercedes promoted events and also talked about the dangers of what was going on. Hamilton took pole, Max Verstappen crashed out in qualifying, and basically it was looking for quite a good race, and then when Mick Schumacher crashed, and then that led to a red flag. Hamilton and teammate Valtteri Bottas pitted, Max Verstappen didn't. That led Verstappen to lead because he changed his tyres under a red flag. Something that I really dislike. And then first restart, Verstappen forced Hamilton wide, and that meant and then that led to another collision where it involved Nikita Mazepin, George Russell and Checo Perez. That was a red flag again. Esteban Ocon was put to the front of the field so that Red Bull and Verstappen didn't get penalised, and at the following restart Verstappen, Hamilton and Ocon touched, and then after Hamilton got past Ocon, it was a tussle between two of the top drivers of 2021, battling and duelling. And then when Verstappen and Hamilton went wide, Verstappen took the shortest way through while Hamilton took the long way out so that he could avoid dramas such as 2008 Belgium. And then when Hamilton was chasing up Verstappen, he was not aware that Verstappen was told to let him through. Verstappen slowed down and brake tested Hamilton. And there was a lot of angry Mercedes team members, including Ron Meadows, sporting director, and Toto Wolff, co-owner and team principal of Mercedes. And then Hamilton got by Verstappen until Verstappen decided to get back through, doing something similar to what Hamilton did to Kimi Räikkönen at Spa 2008. Hamilton got through for a third time, but forced Verstappen wide and got a warning as a result. Verstappen was second, but was given 5 seconds for getting an advantage by leaving the track, and 10 seconds for brake testing Hamilton. Valtteri Bottas was third, but Hamilton's victory meant the Drivers' Championship went equals on points, which meant the best of them, whoever was, that meant it was a winner take all. These were my top 10 picks. For those that joined us now, number 10 was 1972 German Grand Prix, number 9 was the 1982 Detroit Grand Prix, number 8 was 1986 Spanish Grand Prix, number 7 was 2010 Korean Grand Prix, number 6 was 1991 Spanish Grand Prix, number 5 was the 1984 Portuguese Grand Prix, number 4, 1993 European Grand Prix, number 3, 1976 Japanese Grand Prix, number 2, 2008 Singapore Grand Prix, and number 1 was 2021 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. That's Classic Motorsport Podcasts. I'm Gareth Thomas. Thank you for watching or listening. Remember, like, share, subscribe for more content. Goodbye. Thank you for listening.